Hello and welcome to our sermon series on the story of the Bible, and we've come to part 5, the church. Today Theodore is joining me. I don't know if you're going to have anything to add. Yeah, maybe a little bit later on. Sweet as. So far we have started at the very beginning. And we've gone through we've gone through the whole of the Old Testament. Not almost, we've been through all of the Old Testament. And last week we heard about Jesus. And so at the beginning, God creates everything good. He creates us humans to look after the world and to love one another and to love God. But we reject those purposes and things go awry. God doesn't leave us there. He continues to partner with us and actually seeks to redeem the world from this state of affairs. So he calls Abraham, Moses, and he calls the people of Israel, and he calls them to be a priestly people and a holy nation, the people set apart. The people set apart by God to show the rest of the world what it looks like when God's in charge, when God's your king. And as we heard, things don't go well. They just kind of get caught in the cycle. But God, through all of this, has been making all these promises that things aren't always going to be this way, and he's going to send a Messiah who's going to change everything. And then we came to Jesus, who fulfills all these prophecies, and we have 4 stories, the Gospels, which cover the life of Jesus. Each covers the same stuff, but in slightly different ways. And we see that he fulfills all these promises. I feel like with my Jesus video, I could have gone way more in depth and could have done a way better job. But the last 2,000 years, people have been talking about Jesus, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. Maybe another time I could do another video on Jesus. We'll see. But this week, we have the church. So Jesus has his ministry, and during his ministry, he's constantly calling people to follow him. And he has his 12 main dudes, the 12 apostles, they're called, and they're kind of his best mates. And he invests a lot of time in them, a lot of energy in them, and teaching them to do what he did. And then Jesus' death and resurrection happens. And in the midst of the death, and then even with the resurrection, the disciples are really, really confused, aren't they, Theodore? They're really, really confused. Even though Jesus has been journeying with them for 3 or 4 years, teaching them, and even after he's resurrected, they're still kind of unsure. What's just happened? What's this all about? How has Jesus fulfilled all these promises? And Jesus, in his resurrection appearances, teaches them more about what all this means. We heard about the Road of Emmaus in the introduction, where he shows how he tells 2 disciples how he fulfills all these promises. We don't get to hear that conversation in detail, but it would have been great to have been there. And at the very end of this kind of resurrection season, he gathers all of his disciples back in Galilee, and he says, I'm sending you out to make disciples of the nations. To make disciples of all the nations. I'm sending you out. Go make disciples of all the nations and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teach them to do what I've taught you. And then he disappears up into heaven. And even in that moment, we're told in the Bible that those disciples, some worship, but some still doubt, some are still confused about what this is all about and what's going on. But Jesus has told them, just wait in Jerusalem, and I will send you a helper. I will send you the Holy Spirit. And when the Holy Spirit comes on you, then it's all going to change. And so at the beginning of the book of Acts, we hear about the day of Pentecost, and we're told that these disciples have been praying together in the upper room, and then all of a sudden the Holy Spirit descends on them like a rushing wind. And they immediately burst out onto the street, and they start speaking languages, new languages through this Holy Spirit power, and which is a good thing because the streets are full of pilgrims from all over the world who all speak different languages, all these Israelites who are spread all over the world. And they start hearing this good news about Jesus in a way that they can understand. And Peter gets up and he starts preaching. And you can see for Peter, all of a sudden it all makes sense. This Jesus guy, it makes complete sense. And he retells the story like I've been doing, but he does a way better job than I do. You really should just read the Bible for yourselves rather than watching these videos. He tells the story and how it all points to Jesus and how Jesus fulfills all the promises to the Israelites and to the world and how he's bringing about this new redemption. And so the church is born, what we call the church. And in lots of ways, the church is just a continuation of the same people of Israel, the people who have been called by God to be those people set apart to show the rest of the world what it looks like, well, God's in charge. But things change. Things become completely different. So it's the same, still the people of God, to show the rest of the world what it looks like when God's in charge. But different in that no longer is it about the temple. No longer is it about the law, or the temple or tabernacle. No longer is it about the law, and no longer is it about the land. Everything changes. Now it's all about Jesus. Jesus, as I said last week, is kind of the person that you meet when you meet God. No longer do you have to go to a temple to meet with God. All you have to do is know Jesus. And through the power of the Holy Spirit. There's the law. No longer do we follow the Old Testament law as Moses put it out, but we get to the heart of the law, which is all about loving one another and loving God and doing what Jesus did and learning to be more like Jesus. Jesus becomes the law. Yeah, Jesus becomes the law. And then, as Jesus said, rather than everybody coming to Jerusalem, everybody coming to Israel, we go out into all the world, and the nations, the tribes, the nations, the rest of the world becomes God's new promised land. The whole world becomes God's promised land. So in some ways it's the same. Still the people of God, called to show the rest of the world what it looks like when God's in charge. But now it all centers on Jesus. And now it's in the whole world. And the rest of the New Testament is the people of God trying to figure out this whole Jesus thing. So we have the book of Acts, which is the story of the early church, the first few decades of the church and the way that it went out from Jerusalem and just went around the known world. And then we also have a whole bunch of letters from the apostles, from the people who were planting new churches, and they were writing letters to these churches to help them figure out this whole new Jesus thing. How do you be the people of God when it's all focused on Jesus? And they find out that it's now no longer about the temple. It's all about Jesus. It's no longer all about the law. It's all about following Jesus. And it now goes out into the whole world. And it's this whole world thing that became the really a big bit of struggle for the people of God, because it seems like no longer did you have to be an Israelite to be a person of God. You could be from any nation. You didn't have to be from the line of the descendants of Abraham. Anybody could now be a follower of Jesus, because it was all about Jesus. Anybody could come to Jesus, know Jesus, be filled with the Holy Spirit, and become the church, become the people of God, become the new Israel. And this caused a heck of a lot of tension. How are we supposed to be the people of God? How are we supposed to be the people of God? And so you just have all these letters, these stories about them figuring that out. And there was a lot of heartache and trouble trying to figure that out. It was a tough time. People were falling out with each other. Yeah, people were falling out with each other. You're getting tired of this, aren't you? It's all right, we'll wrap up soon. People were falling out with each other. You know, if you were a Gentile, a non-Israelite, and you became the people of God, did you have to be circumcised? Because that was one of the rules under the old laws. What now does it mean to be the people of God? And they slowly figured out it's all about Jesus. It's all about Jesus. Jesus becomes the marker of what it means to be the people of God. He's the one who shows us what God is like. He shows us how best to follow God. So it becomes our relationship with God. Our relationship with Jesus is the marker of the people of God. And now in the Bible, we get the first, few decades of the story. But this is our story. We're part of the story too. We are in the time of the church. And there's another video after this because we get to hear the end of the story. This isn't the end of the story. Where we are now is not the end of the story. But from the book of Acts and those letters that we find in the New Testament, those are our story. We are now the church. We are given the Holy Spirit in the same way that the early church was given the Holy Spirit. Their story is our story. What they did, we do. It's our story. So that's part 5 of the church. Thanks for listening. Say bye-bye. Bye.